I need to tell you about the exact moment my marriage ended. And it wasn't during the divorce. It was 5 months before that, sitting in our kitchen on a Tuesday night when my wife looked me dead in the eye and said, "My family always comes first. You're second. And you knew that when you married me." But let me back up because you need to understand how I got there. We'd been married for 5 years, together for 7. And for most of that time, I thought I was building a life with my wife. Turns out I was funding a family welfare program I never signed up for. Her parents lived 20 minutes away in a house they were constantly about to lose. Even though her dad had a decent job and her mom worked part-time, her brother was 32 and somehow always between jobs, but never between emergencies. And her sister was married with 2 kids, but always needed help with unexpected expenses that were surprisingly predictable if you paid attention. I'm not rich. I work in IT management. I make good money, but I'm not pulling 6 figures. My wife worked as a teacher, so she made less, but still contributed. Or at least I thought she did until I started actually looking at where money was going. It started small like these things always do. Her dad's car needed a brake job, and could I spot him 500 until next week? Her brother's landlord was threatening eviction, so could we cover his rent just this once? Her sister's kids needed new winter coats, and wasn't family supposed to help family? Her mom's medication wasn't covered, and it was only $300. Next week never came. Just this once turned into every few months. Family helping family apparently meant me writing checks, while everyone else wrote thank you texts. I kept a spreadsheet because I'm that kind of person, not because I was planning anything, but because I needed to see it in front of me to believe it was real. Over 3 years I'd given or loaned her family $24,000, not counting the dinners I paid for, the groceries I bought when visiting, the birthday gifts and Christmas presents that somehow always came from us, but were paid for by me. My wife knew, of course she knew, but whenever I brought it up she'd get this look like I was being petty, like I was counting pennies while her family was drowning, like wanting my money back, made me some kind of villain in a story where I was supposed to be the hero. The birthday trip was supposed to be different. I'd planned it for months, a long weekend in the mountains at this resort I'd been saving for. Separate savings account she didn't have access to because I'd learned that lesson. We were supposed to leave on Friday morning. Thursday night, I came home from work and found her crying at the kitchen table. Her brother had called. He was in some kind of trouble. He needed help right away. Could we cancel the trip and use that money to help him instead? She'd already called the resort to cancel our reservation. I just stood there holding my work bag, watching her cry, and something in me that had been bending for 5 years finally snapped. I said no. I said we're going on this trip. I said her brother is a grown man who makes his own problems. I said I'm done. She stopped crying real quick. Her face went from sad to shocked to angry in about 3 seconds. She stood up, and that's when she said it. "My family always comes first. You're second. And you knew that when you married me." Like it was obvious, like it was written in our vows, and I'd just forgotten. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd loved for 7 years, this woman I'd built a life with, this woman who apparently had a ranked list of priorities, and I wasn't even in the top spot. And I said, "Good to know. Thanks for clarifying that." And I walked upstairs and started packing. She followed me asking what I was doing. I said I was going on my birthday trip. She said we couldn't afford it if we were helping her brother. I said that's not my problem anymore. She said I was being selfish. I said maybe so. I called my buddy Mike, asked if he wanted a free weekend in the mountains. He said hell yes. I picked him up Friday morning, and we drove 4 hours north to a resort my wife had already canceled without asking me. I spent my birthday weekend hiking and drinking beer and not checking my phone. Mike asked what was going on, and I told him everything. He listened and then said, "Man, you've been an ATM with a wedding ring." And he wasn't wrong. When I got home Sunday night, the house was quiet. My wife was in the bedroom. I could hear her on the phone with her mom. I unpacked and took a shower and went to bed in the guest room. Monday morning, I called my bank. I removed her from my checking account. I removed her from my savings account. I removed her from my credit cards. I set up direct deposit to go into an account with only my name on it. I calculated exactly half of our monthly bills, and that's all I was going to pay from now on. When she found out 2 days later, she lost her mind. She couldn't believe I'd cut her off financially. I reminded her that she'd told me I was second place. I was just acting accordingly. She said I was punishing her for being honest. I said no. I was protecting myself from being used. Her family started calling me. Her dad left me 3 voicemails about how I was destroying his daughter's life. Her mom showed up at my office crying about how could I be so cruel. Her sister sent me a long text about family values. Her brother didn't say anything, but then again, he never did unless he needed money. My wife thought I'd cool off. She thought this was just me being hurt and petty. She thought I'd come around like I always did. She didn't understand that something fundamental had changed. I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I was just done being second place in my own marriage. I was done funding other people's poor decisions. I was done being the solution to problems I didn't create. We lived like roommates for 3 weeks, separate rooms, separate meals, separate lives. She kept trying to talk about it, but there wasn't anything to talk about. She'd told me exactly where I stood, and I'd simply adjusted my behavior to match that reality. I thought maybe this was it. Maybe we'd limp along like this until one of us moved out. Maybe we'd have a calm adult conversation about divorce. Maybe we'd split everything 50-50 and move on with our lives. Then her family came over on a Tuesday night without calling first. All of them, her parents, her brother, her sister, and her husband. They sat in my living room and her brother was crying. Actual tears. And that's when I learned about the $35,000. Her brother had gotten into some kind of trouble. The details were vague, but the number was specific. He owed $35,000 to some very serious people. People who'd already made it clear what happens when you don't pay. Her dad was tapped out. Her sister had nothing. Her mom was begging. And they all turned to look at me like I was the solution, like this was what I was for, like this was my job. My wife stood there with her arms crossed and said, "This is what family does. This is why we're supposed to put family first." And I looked at all of them, at these people who'd been treating me like a bank for 5 years, at my wife who'd literally told me I was second place, and I said one word, "No," and the room exploded. Her mother started crying immediately. Not quiet crying, but that loud sobbing that's meant to make you feel like a monster. Her father stood up and started pacing. Her brother put his head in his hands. Her sister was saying, "How can you be so heartless?" And my wife just stared at me like I'd slapped her. I stayed seated, stayed calm, and repeated myself, "No, I'm not giving anyone $35,000. And her dad turned on me with this look of pure rage and said I was condemning his son to violence. Maybe worse, that I had the money, that I could save him, that this was what being part of a family meant. I asked him why he couldn't take out a loan. He said his credit was maxed. I asked why her sister couldn't help. Her sister said they had their own problems. I asked why her brother couldn't go to the police. And everyone went quiet because apparently that wasn't an option for reasons nobody wanted to explain. My wife walked over and stood right in front of me and said, "If you don't help my brother, I'm done. I'll file for divorce tomorrow." And I looked up at her and said, "Okay." And I meant it. The room went silent for about 5 seconds. I think they were all waiting for me to crack, to back down, to pull out my checkbook like I'd done 100 times before, but I just sat there. My wife's face went through about 6 different emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, panic, more anger, then back to disbelief. She said, "You can't be serious." And I said I was completely serious. She said, "You'd really let us lose everything over money?" And I said I wasn't letting anyone lose anything. Her brother made his own choices, and those choices had consequences I wasn't responsible for. Her father called me selfish. Her mother called me cruel. Her sister said I never really loved my wife. Her brother finally looked up and said, "I could die." And I said, "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you got into whatever mess this is." And I stood up and told all of them to leave my house. They didn't move at first. They just kept talking over each other, begging, threatening, guilt-tripping. So I pulled out my phone and said, "You can leave voluntarily, or I can call the police, and they'll help you leave." And that finally got them moving. My wife stayed, of course. She stood in the living room after her family left and told me I'd just destroyed her entire family. I said her family destroyed themselves. She said I was supposed to protect them. I said I was supposed to be her husband, not her ATM. She said, "If you don't fix this, I'm filing for divorce." And I said, "Go ahead." And I went upstairs. I heard her on the phone all night, crying to her mother, crying to her sister, probably calling everyone she knew to tell them what a terrible person I was. I didn't care anymore. I was past caring. The next morning I woke up and she was already gone. I went to work like normal, came home to an empty house. She'd taken some clothes and her laptop. I figured she was staying with her parents. 3 days went by with no contact. I thought maybe that was it. Maybe she'd actually file and we'd be done. Then on Saturday morning I was backing out of my driveway and her father was standing behind my car. I got out and told him to move. He said we needed to talk. I said we had nothing to talk about. He said I was making a huge mistake. I said the only mistake I made was enabling everyone for 5 years. He said his son was in real danger. I said that wasn't my problem. And then he said something that made my blood run cold. He said, "You know we helped you buy this house. That money was supposed to be a gift, but maybe we need to reconsider that. And I realized they were going to try to come after me legally. I got back in my car, drove to my office even though it was Saturday, and I started documenting everything. I pulled bank statements, I pulled text messages, I pulled emails, every single transaction, every single request, every single time I'd paid for something I wasn't supposed to. I created a folder on my computer labeled Evidence, and I started filling it. That afternoon, my wife texted me, "We need to talk." I didn't respond. She texted again an hour later. "I'm serious. We need to figure this out." I didn't respond. She called me 6 times. I didn't answer. Finally, she texted, "Fine, be that way, but this isn't over." Monday morning, I got called into HR. Someone had filed a complaint about me, an anonymous complaint claiming I was creating a hostile work environment, making inappropriate comments, making people uncomfortable. It was all vague but serious enough that HR had to investigate. I knew immediately it was her family. I sat through the interview. I answered every question honestly. I told them I was going through a separation and I suspected this was retaliation. They said they'd look into it. I went back to my desk and added this to my evidence folder. That night, I found my car keyed in the parking lot, deep scratches down both sides, thousands of dollars in damage. I filed a police report. I pulled security footage from the office building. The footage was grainy, but you could see a woman who looked a lot like my wife's sister walking past my car around lunchtime. Wednesday, her mother showed up at my office again, this time with my wife. They cornered me in the parking lot. Her mother was begging me to reconsider. My wife was crying, saying we could fix this, saying she didn't mean what she said about divorce, saying we could go to counseling, saying we could work it out if I just helped her brother this one time. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and I realized I didn't recognize her anymore. Or maybe I was finally seeing her clearly for the first time. I said, "You told me I was second place. I believed you. I'm done being second place in my own life." And I walked away. She grabbed my arm. I pulled away. Her mother said, "Please, just think about what you're doing." And I said, "I have been thinking about it. I've been thinking about it for 5 years. I'm done thinking." And I got in my car and drove off. I watched them in my rearview mirror standing in the parking lot. My wife was crying and her mother was holding her, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no regret, just relief. 2 days later, I got served with divorce papers. She was asking for alimony. She was asking for me to pay her legal fees. She was asking for half the house, even though I'd paid 70% of the mortgage. She was claiming financial abuse because I'd cut her off from my accounts. She was claiming emotional distress. She was claiming I'd isolated her from her family. It was all lies, but it was there in legal language on official paper. I called a lawyer that afternoon, a guy my buddy Mike recommended. His name was David, and he was exactly what I needed. No nonsense, straightforward, and mean when he needed to be. I showed him my evidence folder. He spent an hour going through it. And when he was done, he looked up at me and smiled and said, "She's not going to get a single penny." And for the first time in weeks, I smiled back. My wife tried calling me that weekend. I didn't answer. She texted saying we should talk before lawyers got involved. I didn't respond. She showed up at the house on Sunday morning. I didn't open the door. She stood on the porch yelling through the door that I was being unreasonable, that we could still fix this, that she loved me. I just turned up the TV and waited for her to leave. Her family started a new campaign. Her father left voicemails threatening legal action about the house money. Her sister kept driving by at odd hours. Her brother sent me a long, rambling text about how I was destroying innocent people. Her mother tried to friend me on social media, which was honestly just weird. I blocked all of them. I saved all the messages. I added everything to my evidence folder. My lawyer filed our response. We denied everything. We counterclaimed for half the money I'd loaned her family. We included the spreadsheet as evidence. We included text messages where she admitted her family came first. We included my bank statements showing I'd paid 70% of all household expenses for 5 years. We included proof that she'd taken out credit cards in her name and used them to pay for her family's emergencies. We were going nuclear, and we had the receipts. 3 weeks later, we had our first court date. Just a preliminary hearing to set timelines. But her whole family showed up, all of them in the courtroom like it was a funeral, her father glaring at me, her mother crying quietly, her sister whispering to my wife, her brother looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, and I sat there next to David in my suit, calm, quiet, ready. And when the judge walked in, I knew this was just the beginning. The actual trial was set for 2 months later, and those 2 months were the longest of my life. My wife's lawyer kept trying to negotiate. They wanted me to pay spousal support for 3 years. They wanted me to cover her legal fees. They wanted me to give her 60% of the house equity. David laughed when he read their proposal and sent back our counteroffer: zero alimony, 50-50 split on everything, and she pays her own legal fees. They rejected it immediately. My wife tried one more time to contact me directly. She showed up at my gym, waited in the parking lot until I came out. She looked terrible, like she hadn't been sleeping. She said, "Please, can we just talk like adults?" And I said, "That's what lawyers are for." And I got in my car. She stood there crying, but I didn't look back. I was done being manipulated by tears. Her family kept up their campaign. Her father left a review on my company's website claiming I was a fraud. I had to get corporate legal involved to remove it. Her sister created a fake social media account and tried to message my friends claiming I was abusive. Nobody believed her because they all knew what had been going on. Her brother apparently skipped town because suddenly nobody mentioned him anymore. I assumed he either paid his debts or ran from them. Either way, it wasn't my problem. The day of the trial finally came. I took the day off work. I wore my best suit. I brought 3 copies of my evidence folder. David had prepared me for every question, every accusation, every manipulation tactic they might use. I was ready. Her whole family was there again. Filling up the rows behind her table like this was some kind of sporting event they were going to win through pure numbers. My side was just me, David, and Mike, who took the day off to support me. I didn't need a crowd. I had the truth. Her lawyer went first, painted me as a financial abuser who controlled everything, who isolated my wife from her loving family, who cut her off without warning as punishment for standing up for her family values, who was vindictive and cruel. It was a good story. It was completely false, but it was a good story. Then David stood up and calmly, methodically, destroyed every single claim. He presented the spreadsheet showing $24,000 in loans that were never repaid. He presented bank statements showing I'd paid for 70% of our household expenses while my wife spent her money on her family. He presented the credit card statements showing she'd maxed out cards to give money to her relatives. He presented text messages where she explicitly said her family came first and I was second. He presented my evidence of the harassment, the keyed car, the false HR complaint, the stalking, and then he presented one thing I didn't know he had: a recording. Apparently, Mike had been at the house the day her family ambushed me about the $35,000. He'd stopped by to drop off something and heard the whole thing through the door. He'd recorded it on his phone. It wasn't admissible in court because of consent laws, but David had the transcript. Her brother admitting he owed money to dangerous people. Her father admitting their credit was destroyed. My wife saying, "If you don't help my brother, I'm filing for divorce." And me calmly saying no. It was all there in black and white. The judge read through everything, asked a few clarifying questions, looked at my wife's lawyer who had gone very quiet, and then she made her ruling. No alimony, no spousal support, no legal fees paid by me, 50-50 split on all marital assets, and she strongly suggested my wife drop the financial abuse claims unless she wanted me to countersue for defamation. It was everything we wanted and more. Her family sat there in stunned silence. Her mother was crying again, but this time nobody cared. Her father looked like he'd aged 10 years. Her sister was whispering angrily to her husband, and my wife just stared at the table. She didn't look at me once. After the trial, David told me I should feel good, that this was a total victory, that most guys in my situation get destroyed in divorce court. And he was right. I should have felt triumphant, but mostly I just felt tired. Tired of fighting, tired of defending myself, tired of being treated like the villain for refusing to be a victim. The house sold 3 weeks later. We split the proceeds exactly 50-50. I never asked for the $24,000 back because honestly, I just wanted it to be over. I took my half and bought a condo downtown. Nice building, good gym, no memories of her or her family. I started over. I heard through mutual friends what happened to everyone. Her parents ended up losing their house about 6 months later. Apparently, without my money propping them up, they couldn't keep up with payments. Her sister's marriage fell apart shortly after. Turns out when you can't borrow money from relatives, you have to face your own financial problems. Her brother never came back to town as far as I know, and my ex-wife moved into a small apartment, got a second job, and from what I heard, her family blamed her for everything, for losing the golden goose, for being too honest about where I ranked, for ruining their comfortable setup. About a year after everything was finalized, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "I hope you're happy. You destroyed my entire family." I knew it was her. I stared at that message for a long time, thinking about all the years of manipulation, all the money, all the lies, all the times I'd been made to feel guilty for wanting to be a priority in my own marriage. And I typed back, Your family destroyed themselves. I just stopped being the tool they used to do it, and I blocked the number. I'm doing fine now, better than fine actually. I got a promotion at work. I started dating again. I picked up hobbies I'd abandoned because there was never time or money. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with. I built a life where I'm not second place, where I'm not an ATM, where I'm just me, and that's enough. This whole experience taught me something important. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't revenge, isn't anger, isn't trying to hurt the people who hurt you. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is just stop participating in your own exploitation, walk away, and build something better, because the best revenge isn't making them suffer, it's refusing to suffer yourself. And I haven't suffered in a long time. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments, drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories.